All right, Doug, good morning. We were just talking about the economy, and as part of that conversation, we started talking about jobs and demand for jobs, and and it came back to a topic you've been thinking about and working on for a while now, on this Renaissance man idea. And you mentioned you've been reading some books recently that relate to that and the quandary young people face.
Yeah, well, I guess my interest in this whole area of education and whether you should go to college or not, which people think is necessary to an education, a ridiculous idea. Uh, the first time I ever broached the subject in public, that I recall anyway, was that interview I did with Phil Donahue the day before the national elections in 1980. And I had the stage all to myself. And I think I've mentioned this before, but not everybody watches all of these things. And the audience was very much on my side, except for two things that I said. And one of them was I was recommending that kids not go to college. And especially back in 1980, that was an infamous thing to say because college was still more or less aspirational in those days. I mean, it wasn't like 40 years before that when only the creme de la creme went to college, rich kids and smart kids and highly ambitious kids. Already college was becoming a place where you kind of went after high school because you didn't know what to do and you'd been told that it was necessary to get a job. So anyway, that's when it started. And college has become a complete cesspool at this point. It's not something that I think is even worth considering if you're in high school. And I think there are particular reasons for that. The real problem is that in all colleges and universities, and there may be some exceptions, but I don't know what they are offhand, and I've tried to find out if there are any exceptions. The professors and the administrators, even more than the professors, they're all woke leftists. That seems like a really all-embracing statement to make, but it's true. It's just like gamblers go to Las Vegas. That's the place for them. It draws them. Well, people that see themselves as being intellectuals go to teach in college. They want to change the world. And the kind of people that want to change the world tend to be people that are unhappy with their own lives. So instead of taking care of their own lives and feathering their own nests, they want to go out and basically corrupt the youth. And yes, I know that's one of the two reasons why they executed Socrates many years ago. And Socrates, I guess, was a good guy. I'm on the wire about Socrates, but and I think the sophists, who are sworn enemies, they get a bad rap because the victors write the history books and all this type of thing. But in any event, that's my opening monologue on.
Well, so you should say you shouldn't go to college and you shouldn't even consider it because of the wokeism that's infiltrated the university. But still, from an economic standpoint or from a getting ahead in life standpoint, is there no because of people thinking, yeah, okay, so everyone's woke there, but I want to be successful, I want a career, I want to make money, and this is the path to do it, or is it not?
It used to be, because it used to be that if you had a college degree, it showed that you had a certain degree of knowledge that you would have gained from at least just sitting behind a desk for 4 years, listening to people rap at you. You'd gain some academic knowledge, show that you had a certain economic status that you could take off 4 years and afford to go to college. Shows that you might be ambitious and so forth. So yeah, it used to be a qualification. It used to be a credential, but
Mm.
now it's very different. In my view, going to college shows that you're thoughtless and stupid and not very well motivated. It's kind of like people are now using college as kind of a halfway house for getting into the world. Let's look at it this way. I'm looking at myself. Supposing I'd followed my own advice, and after having gone to high school, and it was a 4-year military boarding school, okay. Now, let's suppose I took my own advice and I didn't go to college. What would I do? Well, as an 18-year-old, I didn't know anything about the world. Where to go, what to learn, I didn't know anything. And there was a danger, just like a lot of kids that get out of high school, maybe they'll just stay at home with their parents and live in the basement and fall into bad habits. What am I going to do? I don't want to work at McDonald's. That's like slave labor. But I'm not qualified to do anything. Nobody's going to lay big bucks on me. So you can get on a slippery slope to nowhere. Okay, maybe that's a reason to go to college. 4 years to goof off and find yourself in the process. Okay. But the reason that I'm against college is that if you have guidance for those 4 years, they're extremely valuable years, because in between 18 and 22, you're more full of vim and vigor and ambition, perhaps than at any other time in your life. The hormones are flowing, you're physically entirely capable, okay? So you don't want to waste it. And the point that I'm making is that today, colleges have turned into cesspools of leftism, wokeism, bad ideas, where the professors and the administrators are actively indoctrinating kids with really destructive ideas, not just neutral and dumb ideas, but actively destructive ideas. And parents idiotically send their kids off to college, well, to get them out of the house, to get them off their hands, hoping that they'll grow up and learn something. But they're putting the kids on a slippery slope to perdition. It's different. If you think you have to go to college today because you went to college 40 years ago or whenever it was, you're living in an anachronism. Things are different today than they were then. And maybe they weren't very good then, but they're really different now. So just to amuse myself and to answer this question intellectually for myself, what do you do when you get out of high school, when you don't want to go to college? Why don't you want to go to college? First of all, it's going to cost you a huge amount of money. And it varies according to where you go and et cetera. But you can spend easy $400,000. And those are after-tax dollars, I've got to point out, to hole up in a good university for 4 years. And is there any point in going to a mediocre or no-name university? No, it'll cost you less. But, at least Harvard has prestige. And at least the kids that you'll meet at Harvard, well, except for the affirmative action people, which it's increasingly full of, they'll come from rich families and they're smart. Okay. But is it worth 400,000 after-tax dollars? I don't think so. And you're precluding yourself from doing really valuable things, which are best done during that 4 years of time, as opposed to sitting behind a desk listening to professors yap at you, try to politicize you. No, So anyway, I picked up this book going on Amazon, just looking to see what's out here. And a couple of college professors wrote this book, Don't Go to College. And they're both, they're both PhDs. Well, one's a JD, but they have lots of degrees and they've both been college teachers and all this type of thing. And they lay out a very good case why you shouldn't go to college. Now, regrettably, from my point of view, a lot of the other ideas that they have in here, I think, are also bad ideas. Okay. And they don't
Like
really help people.
what's an example of another bad idea they have?
Well, is this a bad idea? We can talk about that. In this book, along with the good reasons, they're sound, that they give why you shouldn't go to college, they spend a little bit of time addressing what you should do. And basically, it's get married and get a job. Okay. Is it a good idea to get married when you're 18 or 20? I think it's a bad idea because you don't know enough about, nor does your mate know enough about who they are and what the world is like. Chances are excellent you're going to choose a bad mate based upon what your hormones are telling you at the time. I mean, you should choose a mate because you're kindred spirits. And unfortunately, since it's said, and I think it's probably true, your brain isn't fully formed as a physical organ until you're about 25, you're probably going to make the wrong choice and you're going to be unhappy. They think, well, it's good because it's solid and it's stable, and now you can start earning and get a job and start learning on the job. That's fine, but making a commitment like that at that young age is just a bad idea, in my opinion. There's too much to see and too much to learn before making a long-term commitment, which is what marriage is all about. Then you wind up with a divorce, and then you got another monkey on your back. Yeah. Maybe you got a kid who gets the kid? So these guys haven't thought this out again. So this book, which I'm working on, and I suppose I'm going to finish it, and if I finish it, it'll be a good book, lays out for a 18-year-old what you should do during those 4 years, precisely what you should do and where you should go. And it'll take some money, but going to college takes some money. But my plan will take a lot less money and be a lot less fun. Plenty of time for drinking beer and getting laid too. You don't have to go to college to do that. Absolutely not.
You don't. So, but your plan will or does detail the fact that you have to go. You have to leave. You have to get out of the house. You got to go and do something, right? Experience the world. And that is, like you said, that's the halfway house benefit of college. Probably maybe one of the biggest culturally, I think, for Americans at this stage is that it does get them out of the house and begins to sort of wean them off, make them more independent, at least theoretically. Yeah,
at great expense financially, at great expense in misallocation of time. And I think most important, the point that's made in this book and another book, which I don't have in front of me because it's upstairs. It's called Brutal Minds. That's the second book. And it's written by another PhD professor who's talking about the fact that in colleges and universities, he says exactly what these guys are saying. He comes from a different philosophical point of view. These guys are both Roman Catholic Thomist philosophers. That's their thing.
Stone, yeah.
The other book called Brutal Minds approaches the disaster of current education from a different point of view. He's an ex-military guy. Well, one of these guys is also an ex-military guy, but it's interesting. So I think it's interesting that one of my best friends is Dr. Walter Block. And if you don't know the name, listeners, you should learn the name. Walter's written about 100 books. And he's a professor of economics at the University of Loyola in New Orleans. And I was on the phone to Walter the other day, and I asked him about Walter, what percentage of the professors down there at Loyola, which is a nominally Catholic university, although Walter's a Jew, and we can talk about this in a moment too, because this is another book that I've been reading that has to do with this.
Ah, yeah.
Walter.
Safe Dean's book.
Safe Dean's book. Yes, exactly. And I said, what is it? Like 90% of these guys are woke, which is to say they're psychologically unbalanced. They're mentally unstable, in my opinion, if they're woke, or they're stupid, or they're dishonest. I mean, wokeism it's a terrible disease. So anyway, I asked Walter, what is it, 90%? He says, no, it's like 98%, or maybe 99% of the professors down here are that way. And I've talked to other people, and it really seems that what's going on in colleges isn't a cancer. It's more like a communicable disease. Mm-hmm. And I was a trustee of a college, the 10th oldest college in the country, as a matter of fact, not so far in between Washington, Baltimore, and Annapolis. That's where this place was. And I spent 5 days on campus going to classes and acted as a trustee any number of times. And I can tell you that what I found there, and that was 20 years ago, it's that when you're swimming in a cesspool, even if your ideas, even if you're freshly scrubbed and intellectually clean and solid, you start, when you're talking and surrounded by everybody who's got bad ideas, it starts impinging on your brain. It really does. And unless you want to get into arguments with everybody that you meet, your professors, bad idea, you'll flunk your courses. And who wants to get a D or an F on a course? Or students, you'll be ostracized and canceled in today's radical environment. So if you're just a normal, decent kid who doesn't have strong ideas about anything, you're going to be corrupted. And if you're a kid that has already figured out a lot of things and has what I consider sound philosophical ideas, you're just going to make yourself miserable for a period of time while you're spending a lot of money. So forget about college. I mean, maybe it'll change again in the future. And these guys point out, I'll see if the guy that wrote Brutal Minds, which is also an interesting book. And if you want to follow up on this, it's not my thoughts, but their thoughts, which are pretty good. Question is, what do you do with that 4 years? That's a question I hope to answer, assuming I bother finishing it, because I don't have to do anything. Why should I, go through the intellectual trauma of writing something and making sure it's good and worthwhile, or just let the world continue to go into hell in a handbasket on its own, which it'll do, and I can't stop it or change it, because as I pointed out before, people that think like you and I do, and I guess most of our listeners, we're not even a rounding error, I don't think, on the civilization, or what passes for a civilization here in America, or the West for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you shouldn't do that book, and if it unless it satisfies some amusement or intellectual curiosity, which I think it's done so far to some degree. Because the question, before we start recording was, well, what do you do instead? Well, you actually brought up the point that the risk of staying at home could be a disaster also. So like, that's not the answer. You have to fill, you want to create a void by saying no to college, but that vacuum must be filled by something. So you must have a plan or a direction of some kind, or you'll be worse off.
You're absolutely right. You've got to fill that vacuum with something. And if you're an 18-year-old, I mean, these guys say, get married and get a job. Well, that's, that's something a medieval peasant could have done 500 years ago. So I don't think it's very intelligent advice. So I'm trying to solve that. Give people a plan, but there are decent college professors out there, but they're few and far between. Like one of them certainly is Walter Block, and having mentioned his name, I think Walter's best book, his most important book, is called Defending the Undefendable. It's actually a work of genius. It really is. It's simple, it's easy to read, and it has a cartoon, very well-drawn, clever cartoon on every page explaining principles of economics. And the way he does it, he takes undefendable occupations like the pimp, or like the Shylock, or the drug dealer, all these things that people do, which are supposed to be horrible, and he defends them from an economic point of view, and it's eye-opening. People have never thought about these things. So if you don't do anything else, go on Amazon and get a copy of Defending the Undefendable. You'll be mightily amused, and you'll learn a lot. It's a very important book.
You mentioned you just mentioned safety, and what were you alluding to with
okay,
that?
So and how does Saif Deen, this is his book, or one of them, I'm not sure. How does he relate to Walter?
He also wrote the Bitcoin Standard, I believe.
The Bitcoin Standard, right? Exactly. There's another book he wrote, which I understand has been translated into 35 different languages.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's impressive. So how did I meet Saif Deen? Well, you met him too, because you were on that call with Walter that time, weren't you?
Yep.
And so you and I are on a private Zoom call with other like-minded people, and the question came up of Israel. Does it have a right to exist? Talk about a hot button topic.
The hottest.
Just about. And so Walter, along with Alan Futterman, who's also a friend of mine, much more recent vintage, wrote a book called The Moral Case for Israel, as I recall is the name of the book, where it's quite scholarly and well done, explaining the moral case for Israel, going back to its founding 3,000 years ago, and why it should exist today, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, interesting. I read the book and I said, good in many ways, but not, I don't buy the moral case for Israel. Well, I don't buy the moral case for the existence of any nation state, quite frankly. That's the first thing. But the other guys on the call, I think it was Nick Giambruno primarily, who knows Safadine, who's a Palestinian, and Safadine, who's also a first-class economist like Walter, and a Palestinian, not a Jew, obviously, was going to present the case why Israel shouldn't exist. And I've got to say, Safadine won the Walter disappointed everybody on the call, and nobody else on the call had a dog in the fight. I mean, I don't care. I'm a friend of Palestine. I'm a friend of Israel. I mean, I hope they're happy and, stay out of trouble with each other, and I'm fine with both of them. But Walter lost us because he was more important defending Judaism and the Jewish people than it was being intellectually honest. I was shocked. first time I've seen Walter do that in my life,
Yeah.
frankly. Anyway, but this got me to Safadine. So since, I'm a member of this call, Safadine took it upon himself to send me this book. And Principles of Economics, not the kind of book that you'll just read by yourself. I said, well, since he sent it to me, and since it's nicely endorsed, I feel an obligation to read it, because I think I know quite a bit about economics and think about the subject and all that. So I started reading the book and skipping around in it. And I said, damn, this is actually a really good book. An economics text that is readable and interesting and logical and makes sense and is correct. And the way that he's done this is that it's a presentation of Austrian school economics, and an excellent one, in my opinion, taking all of the breakthroughs that Mises and people like that made and put them in, let's say, bite size and manageable pieces, so that the chapters in it are divided, and chapters are short, divided into subsections, so that you can pick it up anywhere and start reading. And I did this in a number of places, and I kept reading. I said, this is interesting. This, what an unusual thing to say about an economics test, most of which are pseudo-mathematical and abstruse and boring and wrong. So if you're looking to get a proper academic, but very interesting introduction to Austrian economics, exactly what did Mises and these people say, this is the book. I was shocked. It's so good.
Well, he's a very good thinker and an excellent debater. And I believe that the debate between he and Walter is on YouTube. I'll find it and I'll link to it in the description of this, because if people haven't seen it, they'd enjoy it. I mean, it was sad for Walter. I almost don't want people to see it for Walter's sake, but it was very compelling.
Yeah. Walter let his emotional attachment to the Jewish people overwhelm his logical, intellectual rigor, something that he's noted for. So anyway, so those are, I guess I've recommended a couple of books, with caveats on why you shouldn't go to college, which you shouldn't. And then we got into Walter's book, Defending the Undefendable, and Safadine's book, Principles of Economics. So I suggest everybody hit Amazon and do some buying and do some reading.
Summer reading list available now.
Yeah, and you won't find any of these books in your local library.
No. Well, no one even goes to local libraries anymore. They won't find it on the New York Times recommended list either, I'm sure.
You can't see, nobody goes to libraries anymore, because that's where bums and vagrants go to hang out during the day and watch porn on the free computers that are there.
Sad to say, that's true. Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. Well, I think that's good for today, Doug. That's great. So we'll leave the answer of what to do instead of college for another episode, or maybe even until the book is released. But in the short term, do not send your kids to school this fall. Don't let them go to college. And if you're considering going to college this fall, understand that that's a huge mistake, and start trying to fill that vacuum with something else.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a misallocation of money. It's a waste of money to get something that is actively destructive and corrupting. It is totally perverse. Yes, I agree.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it there for now, Doug. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt.